Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show with Adam Doran on Cold Call Mastery for sellers, JV partners, buyers, and private lenders. I'm Dan Breslin, host of the REI Diamond Show. If this is your first time listening, I'd like to begin by welcoming you to the show. And if you're a regular listener, I appreciate that you keep coming back. I'll start off by letting you know that this podcast, the REI Diamond Show, is an official pitch-free zone. I don't do mentoring, I don't offer coaching, and I don't do webinars trying to sell you info products. I make my money by selling under-market, low-priced, and profitable real estate deals to other investors, as well as fixing and flipping my own deals. Basically, I just want to be upfront and let you know that I'm not about to pitch you anything here on this episode, or any other episode for that matter, so you can relax and enjoy the show. You may want to grab a pen and pad to take notes. I always do. And my goal is always to bring you the ideas and nuances that are working in a variety of markets through the expert guests that I invite on the show. If you're already receiving my emails, you probably know that I close a ton of off-market real estate deals. That is, deals that are done directly with sellers, aka wholesale deals. We have been averaging 6 contracts per week for the last month and a half, in our various markets. How would you like to get a copy of my 165-page business plan I wrote 3 years ago, right before my deal volume skyrocketed? If you stick around through this entire episode, I'll tell you how you can get a copy right away. And I promise there will be no sales page, no upsells, and no other BS of any kind. Just an opportunity to do the same thing I'm doing in your real estate market, closing a boatload of off-market deals. On this episode, Adam and I discuss some challenges associated with building a real estate business part-time while still working full-time in your current career. That's exactly what Adam has and is still doing in Kansas City. We also talk about using LinkedIn to generate a network of buyers, partners, and even private lenders, and how to figure out ways to talk and connect with people through LinkedIn that are effective, and so you're not kind of getting brushed off. And the most exciting part, at least for me, because I'm currently building a research and seller lead generation department in my own company, Adam shares 3 simple sentences which are the most effective for breaking the ice when cold calling sellers. Without any further ado, welcome to the show, Mr. Adam Doran. How you doing today?
Hey, Dan. Thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity to share. I'm doing great today.
Absolutely. So you're coming to us from
Kansas City. Yeah, okay. Right in the heart of America.
Nice. Let's get started so people can kind of get a feel for who you are, your background, what you did before real estate, and how you kind of got into the real estate business.
So I've been a police officer for about the last 15 years. I still have my full-time job, and that's something that I like about real estate is it's something you can get involved with, either part-time, full-time, start part-time, and move into full-time. So it was 2011 that I got started. I'd been a cop for 10 years at that point. Wasn't really happy with the income that I was making. My career was just, falling short of my expectations as far as where I was financially at that point. And so I knew I needed something else. And I kind of just examined, the contacts that I had, the people I knew, and I noticed that all the people I knew that had achieved either financial freedom or at least were living a lot better than me, they had some sort of involvement in real estate. So I went to a seminar on the advice of a friend, like many of us, I think, do when we get started in this. I went to a seminar and decided real estate would be a key to building that extra income in my life and eventually setting me free financially. Since getting involved, real estate's been good to me. Over the last 5 years, built a small portfolio of single-family rentals here in Kansas City where I live. And I've also been wholesaling ever since. Yeah, I just enjoy it as something that provides a supplemental income and eventually will be a nice retirement.
Nice. So we had Abi Golhar on the show. I think it will be 3 weeks by the time this episode airs. He had referred you. He said that I had to get you on the show too, and I wanted to really make sure that we did that. So I kind of wanted to publicly thank him for giving us the connection here as well. And I know that we're going to get into a very similar topic to the things that Abi had talked about too in a few minutes. But just to kind of give us a background, you're in police work full time still, correct, Adam?
Yes. I still got my full-time job. That's one thing where I don't know. I looked at some of your other guests you have. You got some folks that have been on here that are on full-time real estate, which is awesome, and I hope to be there someday soon. But I also hope that maybe I can connect with some of your listeners on the fact that maybe some of them have a full-time job still and they're getting into real estate, and just let them see that it is possible to do it part-time with some success and really change your standard of living and make your life better.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to highlight as well. So like my background, I had nothing working for me whatsoever at the point in time when I got into real estate in 2006. I mean, I had been laid off from a minimum wage job. I certainly had no career. I did have some skills when it came to selling, from working in the car business and a couple other bouncing around odds and ends type sales job in my early 20s. But I had no other option. It was this got to work full time to provide the income for me, or there's just no other thing going on. So you make a great point. And, a lot of people have, good careers when they look at real estate and say, wow, I can have an even better lifestyle through real estate. But, trying to juggle both of those and gain any level of success in the new venture while still holding on to the first is definitely commendable. So can we talk about a little bit what the business looks like today and kind of your life? So you're still full-time in police work, and how are you fitting this in, and what kind of, what amount of deals are you doing, what type of deals, and what is, let's say, your example of a day or a week in the life of your business right now?
Sure. So the nice thing about my career is I do have a fixed schedule, and having been in it for about a decade when I first got involved in real estate, my schedule was pretty well fixed and predictable, which means I have days of the week I can dedicate to the business. And so with those 3 days a week that I have off and I'm able to dedicate to the business, I've kind of figured out through trial and error really what works well for me. So I have networking days. I have days where I go out and evaluate deals. And then, of course, when deals do pop up that I don't expect, most of the time I'm able to break free because I work at night at my full-time job, which leaves me free during the day a lot of the time to go out and evaluate deals or, pull the trigger on a good deal that pops up really quick. But a typical day would, on a day off, let's say, I would spend some time networking. I would have a few deals to look at, so I'll go out, drive, look at the deal, pull the trigger if it's a good deal. And then also I've got an email list, so I'm sending out emails to my list if we have any properties for wholesale. And then, as far as the rental portfolio is concerned, we do have a professional manager. So once a property has been acquired and it gets fixed up, our manager pretty much takes it from there as far as keeping it occupied, tenanted and cash flowing. So that is a huge, huge piece of, I think, the success that my business has had as far as with our rental properties is the whole management side is handled for us. I think professional management is so key.
I know it's a bit of a tangent from what we want to get on to, but would you mind just kind of detailing, let's say, an example of your last rental, the purchase price, the amount of construction, how long that took to stand that up? Did you refinance it once it was done, or did you just leave your cash in there? And what kind of rents are you getting after the taxes, et cetera? If you could just kind of play by play for somebody who's hasn't bought or maybe just bought one or two rental properties, just to get a gauge for what expectation you have and what you're finding in Kansas City.
Sure. Yeah. And as far as the rentals are concerned, my experience is really the Kansas City market. So I'll just share what the numbers have been like here on our most recent. And there are a couple different choices the investor has here as far as buy and holds. There are higher numbers on paper if you go into some of the more urban areas where you can buy houses at a lower all-in cost. The bread and butter houses for our business that we've focused on is our purchase price will usually be in the low 30s to mid 40s, and then we'll spend less than $20,000 to fix it. So we'll try to get them in a state of repair where we don't have to commit more than $20,000 in repairs. So most of the time our all-in is going to be $50,000 and below, sometimes $60,000 and below. Our rents are going to range from 700s to high 800s most of the time. By the time we fix them and get them cash flowing, it's usually about a 90-day period, sometimes a little longer, but we try to have it be 90 days or less. And our net annual ROI is usually going to range between 12 and 16%. I always like to aim for 14 to 16%. These properties are going to form what's going to be my long-term retirement income, so that's just the numbers that I aim for.
What will be the average property tax each year that you would have to pay the city and the state, whoever's collecting the tax in that area?
So on the Missouri side, they actually run a little bit lower, and you usually will have a tax bill less than $1,000 a year. On the Kansas side, it's usually going to be between $1,100 and $1,200 a year.
Got it. Does that include the school taxes and, and everything? That's like the full total?
That's everything for your property tax bill.
Yeah, I'm always curious. I mean, I'm in the Chicago market as we're recording this right now. I'm sitting in the city of Chicago, and we have certain areas where the taxes are maybe like $2,000 to $4,000 a year. I'm from the Philadelphia market, so in the city of Philadelphia for the rental at the price point that you just mentioned there, you're pretty similar to that. You're probably anywhere from $700 a year taxes to $1,400 for taxes for a property that would be, 50, 60 all in, rent around that same $700, $800. And then there's some areas it's mind-boggling to make sure you pick the right rental market and area, because the government's lack of or excelling at being financially disciplined could definitely hinder you or help you in the long run. So we have areas like I was just looking at one the other day, Adam, and then the property was a triplex. I mean, this thing, to me, it felt like it was renovated. It should sell for somewhere around $250,000 would be my guess. So we're generating $2,800 to $3,200 a month, but the taxes were like $18,000 and $20,000 for a building of this size. So it really chopped the value down, and these buildings are changing hands for anywhere from $24,000 to like $38,000 on the high end. It's like, man, you couldn't even begin to build that anywhere near close to replacing that property for obviously $38,000. It's kind of like, mind blowing. So for those who are new, or even those who have been in the business for a long time, I think being aware of the property tax situation and the leadership where you're investing is something you want to pay attention to. Let's talk about some of the wholesale deals that you've done. How do you go about lead generation? What are you doing to get these deals on the plate where you're having the ability to look at the properties on your day off, Adam?
So the way that I got started is not necessarily the fastest way to grow. However, when I got started back in 2011, after I got out of that seminar, I was basically resolved, okay, I need to get involved in real estate. I don't know much about it. What am I going to do? And I had the option to dump thousands and thousands of dollars into courses, which over time I eventually ended up doing as well, or to just hit the ground and start making connections with people. So I did what I think a lot of us do, went to local real estate investor meetings, but I also spent a lot of time online on LinkedIn, which ended up being a really powerful tool for me to make some really good connections in real estate. And so over the course of, I networked hard, especially for the first year. I was up late hours at night networking. I was connecting with insane amounts of people. And over that first year, I really just built a strong network and began to see, as I would reach one power player in my market, or, somebody that was several hundred miles away from me, all the power players that I began connecting with, they all knew each other. And so within about a year's time, I had a good network of people in real estate, both those who were buying and those who were selling, which a lot of times the same people too. If they're selling it, they're probably buying it. If they're buying it, they're probably selling it. So after I had built that network, I eventually found myself with an email inbox that would get deals on a regular basis. And I started actually wholesaling remotely and then narrowed my focus into my local market. So the first wholesale deal that I did was done through a connection I made on LinkedIn, and it was a house in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That was the first wholesale deal I ever did, and I didn't make a lot of money. I made $500, but I thought it was the coolest thing ever that I'd wholesale the property from my bedroom in my PJs, literally. I woke up that morning and had somebody that wanted to buy the house, which was really cool. But over time, I just decided there was a little more efficiency for me if I could do everything local. And I also really came to value being able to see the property myself. Not that it's the most efficient thing to drive out to every single property you wholesale. But what was cool was I could get to know a lot of properties quickly because I could drive to them within 15 or 20 minutes of my house. The problem that I ran into wholesaling remotely, and I know there's ways to overcome this. I know there's some people that make really good money wholesaling remotely, but the problem I would run into is I would think I had an interested buyer on a house. I'd get excited, and, I'd have 5 people look at that house, and they'd all tell me that it was in terrible disrepair, and the pictures didn't look that way at all. So I had a lot of deals fall through when I was wholesaling remotely, and I just thought, man, a way that I could fix this is if I really had a true evaluation of the state the property's in, despite what the pictures show. That helped me a lot when I narrowed my focus in locally and was able to actually see the properties, at least to the point where now, I've walked through hundreds upon hundreds of properties, so I have a really good idea. Once I see the address, once I see the pictures, I've got a really good idea. Not to mention, I'm also buying in this market, my local market, right? So I have a vested interest in keeping up with states of repair on the properties, how much repairs are running, what the numbers are like locally. So that's why I kind of narrowed in the focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know that a few years ago, obviously with the advent of the internet and, Zillow and Trulia and a lot more information being available online, powerful tools like Craigslist, LinkedIn, et cetera, there was kind of like a craze where, virtual wholesaling. I remember there's people, selling the book, selling the course, and you could do this anywhere in any market. And like literally we get calls from people in Israel and parts of Africa today on some of the deals we'll have for sale, and they're making an attempt at doing the same thing that you were doing. And I've always had a little bit of an anxiety, or I guess I'll be like the antagonist for virtual wholesaling. And I'd meet a lot of people. I run the networking groups, and they're in Chicago and in Philadelphia, and they're great and powerful ways. And I've met so many people face to face at networking groups that I both attended that other people were running, and as well as the networking groups that I put together. I've met some of my partners have literally walked through the door of my networking events here in Chicago and in Philadelphia, and now we're have abundant, fruitful partnerships. But, in that same pipeline through the networking, I found or had the opportunity to meet with a lot of people who were just getting started, and a lot of them, like yourself, that they didn't have any success at the virtual wholesaling, but they were attempting it and they heard good things about it. And, for me, it's like, wait a minute, it takes a lot of work, a lot of networking, a lot of beating the ground, beating the phones. For me, it's a lot of direct mail. It's a lot of advertising dollars and many different types of advertising to generate and build a pipeline of deals to come across my desk that I can evaluate. And so just like it sounds like you had came to the same revelation when you did the math, it's like, wait a minute, I want to buy and build a portfolio in Kansas City. Well, I want to buy and fix and flip properties, in and around Philadelphia, in and around Chicago. So I better focus all my effort in building up my contacts and really like working on that deal pipeline in the market where it's going to benefit me the most, as opposed to like trying to spread my resources a little too thin throughout the country. And so I was always a strong opponent of the virtual wholesaling as a model, at least without having, physical partners that you can trust on the ground in each market. Let's talk about, that shift, because it sounds like you made the shift from doing some virtual stuff and kind of like trying this and that. And then something started working for you early on, and you started to get deals in Kansas City and really start to get some traction and find that, whoa, this is not a fluke. I didn't just make $500 by accident. This is, in fact, a business I can work part-time on my days off and make real money. Can we talk about maybe that transition, that shift, maybe what you had started to do different and found some success with, Adam?
Sure. And like you were talking about from your own experience, it really did become an issue of efficiency. I looked at what I was doing those first couple of years, and I did deals in, I think, 7 states. I counted them up. It was either 6 or 7 states I did deals in. I just noticed I was on my computer all the time, and I was on my phone all the time. And if it was going to be a full-time business, that would probably be fine. However, I still had a full-time job. I actually ended up going through a divorce in that part of my life too, so I'm a dad half the week. It just wasn't how I wanted to be spending my time. I wanted my business to be raising my standard of living versus locking me down on my computer and my phone all the time. And again, that's the cool thing about real estate is you can do this your way on your terms. So it became an issue of efficiency, and I thought, well, since I'm buying in this market anyway and I'm wanting to build a rental portfolio here in Kansas City anyway, that might as well be where I'm spending my time and my focus, and the relationships that I build here can serve two purposes, not only for acquiring my own portfolio, but for doing the wholesales here too. And plus, with all the people that I knew here from going to the meetings regularly, I always knew somebody that had a house for sale, and I always knew somebody that wanted to buy a house. And so, really that was the system, I guess, if you want to call it that, was that network that was already built and the trust that was earned in, multiple face-to-face meetings with people, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of face-to-face business. I'm a big fan of knowing the people that you work with and building trust. And so, it didn't take but one or two deals with each individual that I was working with here locally before. It's not hard to become someone's favorite person in real estate as long as you're honest and you do things with integrity and you're transparent and you don't play games with numbers and play games with terms. I would imagine most of your listeners, if they've had active involvement in multiple deals, we can all probably recount a story where we had a bad experience, where somebody didn't practice integrity or somebody did play games. And so if you can find the people who don't do those things, it's a breath of fresh air. And those are the people you want to work with all the time. And so, probably about 2.5 years into my real estate business and now shifting that focus to Kansas City locally, I had a really cool experience. And that was, I had a friend here locally that I knew was looking for a certain kind of house. And I happened to have one of these leads pop up off of a bandit sign. Bandit signs were one of the strategies I used a while ago. Kansas City's gotten really, really hard on those now, but there was a while you could do them. And bandit signs were a nice system because I could get the phone to ring on the days I wanted to ring. I'd just go out, in the morning, I'd set bandit signs out, and it was guaranteed I'd have calls by that afternoon. So I went out and looked at this house and immediately knew who would buy it. There was a guy in my network, like I said, that was looking for a certain kind of house in a certain area, and I showed up at this house and was just totally transparent with the lady about what my numbers would be, and she wanted the deal. And so I put the house under contract, made a phone call, and had the house sold in less than an hour, which was really cool. And when that happened, I realized that I had accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in terms of efficiency, and was like, hey, this is something I can do on my days off, maybe do 1 or 2 of these a month, and it significantly raises my standard of living. And so that's how I've been doing my wholesaling since, and it's so much better than being locked down to the computer and the phones every day and trying to deal with houses that are hundreds of miles away that I haven't seen.
So you're telling me you're a police officer that was hanging bandit signs.
Right? And for a while, like I said, it was definitely a system you could use here. However, yeah, they did get really strict about those, and I didn't think it would reflect too well when I made the news.
Yeah.
So I quit doing it before I did.
Yeah, that was a good call. Now, I know we had talked about before the call started, talking to sellers, doing some cold calling. I think I had heard an interview with someone else. I don't remember which other podcast, whether it was Joe Fairless or which one. I know you've been on quite a few.
That's right.
Joe? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And you were doing some cold calling. So could we just kind of talk about that? Because I know a lot of times people will talk about, say, skip tracing. You'll find a seller's number, or you'll go on any variety of places, and I know a lot of people get stumped up on well, what the hell are you supposed to say to a seller? Even people who are in the business for 10, 15 years and bought every deal through a real estate agent, the thought of calling up, somebody who just has a house there without a for sale sign or without a real estate agent listing, that could be somewhat terrifying, and it becomes a lot easier if you know what to say. So do you mind shedding some light on that, Adam?
Sure. And I, just like anybody else, I didn't know what to say when I started cold calling people. I started looking at public records and looking at houses that were going into foreclosure, or I would get the tax list every year, see what was going into tax foreclosure, get a probate list and find out, who's gone through divorce or who's about to inherit a property. And so I had this list of strangers' names and then finding their numbers, and I was terrified. But at the same time, my bandit sign's gone, and not being able to dictate when an email comes in from somebody I already know, I had to have something to fill those gaps of, okay, how am I gonna generate deals in the times where I'm not seeing deals come to the inbox. And so I didn't know what to say at first. I was just terrified, and I did get hung up. I got hung up on. I had people get mad at me on the phone, but I just tried to be a quick learner, and so I developed what's been a really effective script for me, and I'd be happy to share it with your listeners because it's just done really, really well. I'll go through the script, and then I'll point out the parts of it that I think are helpful in just making a connection quickly with people and really instilling a sense of trust. So if you don't mind, I'll just share that script right now.
Sounds like a great idea. It's all yours.
Cool. Well, I just stumbled on this by repetition, doing lots of cold calls to strangers. In the beginning, I wasn't even thinking about developing a script, but this is what kind of ended up coming out. So maybe you've gone through the tax records or the mortgage records, and you call a stranger. And so here's how I start out. I'll say, hi, this is Adam with Make It Move Properties here in Kansas City. Who am I talking with? And I always wanted to ask that question because I want to verify I've got the homeowner on the phone. And so let's say they say Joe. And I'd say, okay, Joe, just so you know, I was going through the public records and I see there may be some issues going on with the mortgage at, and then I would give the address. I don't know the details of that, but so you know, I buy houses in the area. Would it be helpful to you if I were interested in buying the property? Now, there's a lot of things about that script that I just want to point out. First of all, the very first words out of my mouth are my name, my business name, and then I'm there local in Kansas City. So there's three things right there to remove suspicion and try to get those folks at ease. You know, they've probably gotten a lot of calls from wholesalers and others. You know, I know there's lawyer companies about saving people out of foreclosure and stuff. So they've probably had their phone ring already. And so I want them to know who I am by first name, the name of my company, so they can look me up because my company is registered, and also that I'm there in Kansas City. I'm not calling them from, you know, Delaware or California, or I'm right there local and they're going to have the chance to get face-to-face. I think that's huge. So they've got those three pieces of information in my first, you know, sentence that I've spoken out of my mouth. And then I always like to verify I'm on the phone with the homeowner. So I always ask who am I talking with right away because I want to qualify right away. I don't want to be talking to their 12-year-old son or daughter, and I don't want to be talking to, you know, the person at the wrong number. I want to verify I've got the right person. But the other thing is I really try to depersonalize. I don't know if you noticed, but I said, I see there may be some issues going on with the mortgage at. And so I never mention somebody's name. I don't ever say your house or your property. And I always say there may be some issues going on. And I'm allowing them the opportunity because most people are going to explain or justify because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing if you're going through a foreclosure and people want the opportunity to save face. So I give them that opportunity with what I said there. There might be some issues going on with, and then I depersonalize it. I give the address. I don't say your house. I think that's key too. I think that kind of helps lower the walls and helps you connect. And then I say, I don't know the details of that. So they know, okay, this guy searched public records, but he doesn't really know the details. It's just this address came up. But so you know, I buy houses in the area. So again, I'm just making the statement, hey, I buy houses in that area. I'm not asking them to hand over the keys and the deed to the house. I'm just saying, hey, just so you know, I buy houses in the area. And then I ask the question. So they have the chance to come to me for help. I say, would it be helpful to you if I were interested in buying the property? Rather than saying, I'd like to buy your house, you know, and start trying to dive into negotiations. So those little aspects about that script, there's some psychological, you know, there's some understanding about human psychology there. And that script has been super, super successful for me as far as, you know, I just don't get hung up on it anymore. Even if somebody's not open, the cat's out of the bag from the beginning of the conversation. They know who I am, who I'm with, why I called, and that I'd like to offer help by buying the house. And so in 3 sentences, I've said and asked everything I need to qualify that person as a potential seller. And now all they have to do is either engage me in further conversation because they're open to selling their property to me, or they can just tell me, thanks for the call, not interested. And I still get that a lot. You're going to get that a lot. But it's really cool because in 3 sentences, you've qualified, you've started to bring down the walls, and there's an opening to build a connection if that person's open to selling their house. There's one more thing I want to point out too. I think a lot of wholesalers, especially beginner wholesalers, struggle on posture here because they might be calling through that list, and let's say they do their first cold call and the person gets angry or hangs up on them. And then they do their second cold call, and the person gets angry or hangs up. By the time it's time to do the third cold call, they've given up hope. And I just want to suggest that posture is so important here. And what I mean by that is you truly are calling and have the ability to help this person with a non-traditional, creative solution to their problem. So who really should be the one hoping that the other person doesn't hang up? You shouldn't be in that position where you're concerned about that. That seller should be, because truly you've come to offer them help. And so I've always let that be my posture that guides me on the phone. I never feel bad or worry if somebody's going to hang up. If that's their choice, that's their choice. That's fine. But I know that I'm the one that's coming to the table with something that can help this person, and there are people out there who are hoping desperately that somebody will call with a solution to their problem. And so I'm going to be that person if they're open to the conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a solid point, solid script. What does someone have to do to get access to those 3 sentences exactly?
Well, I guess just contact me. I'm more than happy to share that freely.
Fair enough. How many would you say? Are you talking like 1 in 10 you get a somewhat warm, positive response? Are you talking like 1 in 50? Or are you talking like 1 in 3 where when you call and run the script, what kind of ratios?
Yeah, we're somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 10. If I make 10 phone calls, I guarantee you I'm going to be able to look at 1 to 2 of those houses. Yep, it's a pretty strong conversion. And of course, in the beginning when I got started, that wasn't what I was saying to people. I was trying to figure it out. And obviously the conversion rate was much lower. But yeah, definitely if I make 10 calls to a good foreclosure list now, we're going to have the opportunity to look at 1 or 2 of those houses and possibly get into a deal.
Do you leave a message for the seller if you do not get them on the phone on that initial call, or do you just try to call them back as like haven't contacted yet and you want to get a live person?
I don't usually do messages. What I'll do is have the list in front of me. I try to get live people on the phone. So if I don't get a live person on the phone, I'll make a mark or a notation, and we'll go back to that number later.
Do you have any specific targeting tricks, or do you just run down the entire list, or are you only calling properties that are located within your certain strike zone, certain certain school district, a certain zip code, or some other targeting mechanism, or do you indiscriminately call on whoever's welcome to hearing the pitch? You're going to go ahead out there and check out the property?
That's a really good question and a good point. And again, back to what I was saying earlier about how I have a need for efficiency since my time off is limited right now. I will only focus on those areas where I want to be doing deals. So either I'm wanting to purchase that property for our rental portfolio, or I know somebody who's wanting to buy in that area.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. I'd like to kind of go into the LinkedIn strategy. So me, I'm guilty of, I got tons of connections, and people have, thank you to all the people who have written me great reviews, recommended me on there, and I have this profile that's getting tons of activity, and I'm sad to say I have not leveraged it. I have not gotten deeply involved in LinkedIn. I probably log in once a month to accept friend requests and answer a few happy birthday kind of messages from my friends on there. So if you could give, someone like me who either has an account or someone just kind of getting into the business and maybe has LinkedIn, what's the step-by-step? What things would be important for me to start with, and how should I go about setting up and working my LinkedIn strategy for maybe JV partners or potentially buyers or even private lenders?
Sure. Well, it sounds like what you mentioned, you have the luxury of people coming to you on LinkedIn, and that probably has something to do with your podcast and your ability to be out there in front of people, and so folks know who you are. And so for that individual, for you in your situation, it's going to be much easier. All you have to do is simply answer and get back to people because they're already showing up at your virtual front door, right? For the person who really hasn't had much presence and is wanting to draw people, again, I'll just share what I did, and I don't know that it's a system that I'd want to sell, but it did work. When I got started on LinkedIn, I just saw that, man, here's a wide open field of people to connect with. And so what I did was I went crazy for the first 12 months. I probably connected with somewhere between 10 and 20 people a day proactively. I would go out and search, and I would look for people that were in real estate or people that were in lending, any industry that I felt was related. I'd look at their position and the company they were with. And so I would proactively connect with people that I wanted to connect with. And after a while, I would I'd have maybe half those people connect back with me. After a while, I realized there was something I wasn't doing, and a lot of people on LinkedIn aren't doing it. And so if you'll take the extra time and go the extra step to do this, it will increase the amount of people that add you back. But what I did was I started putting in like just, 2 or 3 sentences that complemented something on their profile and found a connecting point. So, I went to Iowa State University. If they went to Iowa State University too, I would point that out. Or maybe they lived, in an area where I have family or friends, and I would say, oh, Raleigh, I know Raleigh. Dallas, I know Dallas. I've got a friend down there. So I would draw connecting points in my initial contact request, and that helped. So for a year, I just went crazy making all these proactive connections. And then I started publishing. And so I've got all these posts out there now. And once I was publishing posts and then sharing those posts in some of the LinkedIn groups, which that was another step, I joined a bunch of the groups related to real estate. And once I would be sharing those posts in the groups, that started drawing people to my profile. And I would say once I had a base of about 1,000 connections, 1,200 connections, and I was publishing some posts and sharing those in groups, that was how I began to draw people. I wasn't leveraging a podcast like you are. I had to go with what I was doing organically. That started drawing people. Well, now I'm up to, I don't know, I think we're around 6,000 or 7,000 connections on LinkedIn now. So now just by sheer numbers, I will have 3 to 5 a day come in and just add me. So that's really cool, but I've built that up over the last 5 years. And so for somebody who's just getting started, what I would say is, first of all, having that profile that's going to draw the person you want. So if you're in real estate, if you're in private lending, you've got to have a profile that reflects that's what you're in and that kind of person you want to connect with. And then what I like to do is I really make the summary and intro short. There are some people that have written novels on their intro and on their summary, and I don't think those of us that are out there trying to make powerful connections are having the time to read through, what would it equate to a typewritten page of background. So I like to keep things really short, and I like to get to the essence of how I can be helpful to them. So instead of talking a whole bunch about me, I talk about them coming from the perspective of what they want to get done. On my Make It Move Properties portion of my profile, I just state very simply that we're buying and selling wholesale properties in Kansas City and acquiring a portfolio of rentals, and I make it clear that if they're looking to purchase a property at a deal, it's about them. Does that make sense? I try not to spend a lot of time on me, but on them and what I can offer them.
Yeah, it sounds like some of the how to win friends and influence people, some of the Dale Carnegie principles he talks about, right? Trying to make it about the other person and starting off with the compliment. It's pretty solid.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I always like to ask questions. I like to ask open-ended questions. So the last sentence of one of my connection requests will usually be an open-ended question that encourages them to respond. And sometimes you get somebody who, is really talkative and shares a lot in that initial response. And so you've already begun to build a really solid connection.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, too, one of the highlights you have there is like you said, leveraging the podcast that I'm on right now. And I do this as a value add. I really try to bring people like yourself on here to give us great, fresh ideas. I have a few pages of actionable items and notes here just from our conversation here for the first, few minutes we've been on the podcast. And I do this as a value add for the people in my network. And we have, 15,000 on my buyers list in Chicago and somewhere around that same number in Philadelphia. And we have a little bit smaller, but still several thousand strong in both Atlanta and Tampa Bay where we're active. And you're absolutely right. If I need like a contract, a recommendation or something of that nature, and I send it out to that list, it's a little bit of a problem at this point because I'll get back like 25, 30 recommendations and I have like too many recommendations. And I really try to personally answer every email that I get, especially if I ask for the help. But if I'm looking for, a new deal in a certain area for myself to keep my crews busy, I can kind of like send that request out. And when you have, numbers, sheer volume of people that you've built up some kind of a relationship with, there's definitely value there in raising the chance that whatever it happens to be that you're looking for or whatever, like you said, whatever service you can provide to those people. For in my case, it's wholesale deals in each of those markets. So I'm bringing a lot of off-market properties. And, that's what I can bring to those numbers. And you definitely gain a ton of strength with 6,000 connections on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't have the personal experience, but I'm sure you can answer that question, right? If I say that has been helpful to get the large numbers, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once you're touching that many other people, I mean, just again, by virtue of sheer numbers, you have folks coming to you because you're showing up in people's feed.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess we should shift gears here again. And I'd like to ask you the questions I ask every one of my guests that come on the show these days. Who is the most successful real estate investor or developer, and why?
That's a really, really good question. And actually, this is somebody I know personally who is not in the public eye, but over the last 30 years, I've watched this guy build and amass an amazing portfolio of cash flowing real estate. His name's Bob, and he used to be the across the street neighbor for me and my family back in the 1980s when I was growing up. And this guy he was somebody that got into real estate part-time and now does it full-time. He was a college professor with my dad at Iowa State. And while he was doing his professor thing, he started a consulting business on the side, which took off. All of a sudden, he found himself with a bunch of extra capital. And so I remember just being a kid watching the guy across the street. It was funny. He would come home in his business suit from his college professor job and then would do consulting on the phone at night and eventually started getting speaking gigs as a consultant. And then on the weekends, I would watch him get into his old grubby clothes, and him and his wife would go out and they would work on the latest property they'd bought. And they started with a duplex, and they purchased the duplex, and they got bank financing. I think he used the money from his consulting business to make the down payment, got bank financing, and they started with the duplex. And then a year later, they had the duplex still, and it was cash flowing, and they bought a fourplex. And he basically, I've learned this since we've had meetings and he's become a mentor to me, his goal was to double the units up until the point that he had his first apartment complex. So they got a fourplex and an eightplex, and all of a sudden they had a 16plex. And then he was in the position where he was able to start purchasing outright apartment complexes. He would have the money for the down payment on a bank loan, and they'd be able to, buy a multi-million-dollar complex. And so for the first 10 years, there wasn't a lot of difference that I noticed in their lives other than they worked really hard a lot. And he did some of the things that I've never done. I've never, wanted to do the full rehab on my own project, but he would do his own handiwork. But all of a sudden, about 10 years later, I noticed Bob and his family had a moving van out front, and they were moving. And they moved to the nicest, newest neighborhood in town. And I remember I always wondered how that happened. And then it wasn't but maybe another 5 or 10 years later, they again made a move. And this time it was to a really nice multi-million-dollar home that they were building. And so it's really interesting. I watched this go on as I was growing up and never really knew much about it. Well, when I got into real estate in 2011, my mom made the statement to me, you should really get together with Bob. Over the last 30 years, he's amassed quite a bunch of property. And so I visited my hometown, which is in central Iowa, Ames, Iowa. And I got together with him for lunch, and he ended up taking me out and driving me around all these different apartment complexes in town that he owned. And he had a spreadsheet that showed the cash flow on all those complexes. And he basically explained to me how over the last 30 years, he had started with a bank loan on the duplex and took me through that sequence just like I took you through. And so now he's got these properties that he owns outright that cash flow more in a month than I will make in a year at my full-time job. And
Nice.
He's got lots of them. And so, I think there's a lot to be said there for buy and hold real estate, for building streams of passive income gradually over time. That wasn't anything that happened overnight. That was something that happened over years and decades. And so that's what I'm duplicating myself right now with our portfolio in Kansas City. And right now it's single families. Eventually it'll be multi-units, up to 4 units, and then eventually it'll be apartment complexes. It just takes time to build.
Adam, do you have 2 or 3, life-changing books, maybe real estate, maybe business, mindset, or success-related that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Absolutely, I do, and a couple of them you'll recognize. One of them will probably be new. The first one is the Bible. I actually think it's an excellent guide to success in business, especially in the book of Proverbs, just a lot of good standards for how to live life and conduct business. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people have a Bible somewhere in their house and they don't read it very often and don't understand there's some really good advice in there. I'll just cite a couple pieces of advice about how to run a business and be successful. Ecclesiastes 11:4 says, farmers who wait for the perfect weather never plant, and if they watch every cloud, they never harvest. And I think the lesson there is don't wait for the conditions to be perfect. You know, you got to take action. Proverbs 14:23 says, hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. You know, you want to be an action taker, not just a big talker. And that's a huge, huge point too. Proverbs 18:13, this is about connecting with people. Spouting off an answer before listening is both shameful and foolish. And I think there's a reason we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's because we need to learn to be listeners in our business affairs and our personal relationships. And the last one is from the Bible is Proverbs 28:27. Whoever gives to the poor will lack nothing, but those who close their eyes to poverty will be cursed. I think it's really important that we remember as we're building wealth and growing wealth that there are people in this world that need assistance. And somebody probably helped us to get to where we are. So it's important to pass that along and help others as well. The next book would be Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I bet I'm not the first person to mention that book on your podcast.
Nah, I guess that's a regular. It shows up.
Yeah, man, that was one of my first that I read when I got started in real estate. And, you know, there's just so much that book has on the power of thought and the subconscious mind and the power of faith. Man, there's some great stories in there. The story of Charles Schwab and U.S. Steel, Edwin Barnes and how he became Thomas Edison's assistant, and just the power of thought, you know, and faith to carry you through on those visions. And then the last one I wanted to share is just a really small book, a quick read. Probably a lot of your listeners haven't heard of it, and it's an amazing little book. It's called Secrets of the World Class by Steve Siebold. Secrets of the World Class. And I'll just read a couple quotes out of there. It's a really short, easy read, and you'll be able to tell, like, each page usually has a quote, but it's got so much profound wisdom on mindset. So I'll just read a couple excerpts from that. The middle class is frustrated. The world class is grateful. The middle class competes. The world class creates. The middle class avoids risk. The world class manages risk. And there's a whole bunch more great knowledge in that book, but those are just a couple excerpts and quotes. So yeah, I really strongly recommend that one too. It's called Secrets of the World Class by Steve Siebold.
Nice. I'd say like 4 or 5 years ago, I've been in the business since 2006, and I had some ups and downs during that time, along with many of us who were in the business during, 07, 08, 09, and 010. And I was humbled. One of these 3 books was the one I picked up. I think it was in February of 2011. It was within a year and a half or so after that, things really started to click, and I've been on a nice, strong, confident, upward trajectory ever since. And I'll let everybody know, just in case there's any confusion, that was the Bible. It wasn't Think and Grow Rich, and I still have yet to read Secrets of the World Class. So that was a life-changing book for me when I finally circled back around and I decided I'm going to read this thing. And I started with the King James Version. That didn't go too great. So once I switched to like a modern English version translation, I started to understand things a little better. I mean, it's still, you can still get the gist and the spirit of it, but one of the exercises that was recommended to me was to read Proverbs. There's 31 chapters, and you read 1 chapter every day for 5 years, and it said that you'll be a millionaire by the time you finish if you consistently do that every day and keep a notebook along with that exercise to take some notations or some revelations or some different things and kind of reflect on what you read. I haven't been consistent yet. I haven't done that every single day, and I'll go back and forth on that habit, but I still like to return to that, and it's a good way for me to kind of track my way in the month and, still at the same time keep that consistency with reading that book. So
I love that. I think that's a great story and a great point, Dan. If somebody said, I'm open to reading the Bible and I never have, I'd said, start in the book of Proverbs, because that book alone is just a great guide to living, of how to conduct yourself. And there's just a lot of wisdom there. So it's really cool that you pointed out that was where you started there.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. I mean, that's definitely the great starting point, to read. If you just kind of landed in some of the other ones, it might not. It's just the book of Proverbs, just like you said, that's the best place, I think, to start for anybody who's into business and maybe listening to the podcast right now and wanted to check that out. Great point. So, Adam, if you could share the crown jewel of wisdom with your 18-year-old or 20-year-old self, what would that be?
It would be this. Freedom to live the life you desire is about having sufficient cash flow, because you won't be free to do the things you want, to help the people you love, and give to the causes you care about unless you have sufficient cash flow. And it's not going to come from your job. Your job is not going to get you there. Going into debt for a degree to get a better job is also not going to get you there. You have to learn to create income, consistent month-to-month income, and you have to use the money that comes from that to purchase cash-flowing assets. Real estate obviously being one of the best because it's tax-advantaged. You can depreciate it against the income. It's the only asset I'm aware of. You can actually depreciate it on paper, but yet it appreciates over time in value, and it can make you lump sums of money, every once in a while, and all while paying you month to month in the form of rent payments with cash flowing property. And I'm not wanting to get on a tangent, this is related, but I've done the research. Half the middle class, Dan, is going to retire into poverty for lack of financial planning because they haven't properly positioned themselves for what's coming in the future. One of the old paradigms people are still living off of and using for their financial planning, and this is what I'd want to tell every 18-year-old, 20-year-old kid that's getting ready to go to college. There's this belief that if you save, and plug it into your employer-sponsored retirement plan, when you retire, it'll have grown and you're going to have enough money, just a big pile of money that you can live off of. And that just isn't true. We've got increasing life expectancies, increasing medical technology. People are living longer. The Social Security system's unsustainable. There's increased government spending. I could go on and on and on. But the short version is you have to learn to create income. And it can't just be something that somebody else pays you that you depend on your job. It has to be your own creation. So you got to figure out what your skill set is, and you've got to apply that and create streams of income. I chose real estate. Your listeners probably chose real estate. But whatever it is, I just encourage everybody to be entrepreneurial and learn to create streams of income and have cash flow in your life. It's what you're going to need in order to be free.
All right, that's great. Adam, if anybody wanted to reach out, get some more information about you or maybe find you online, where would be the best to contact you?
I do have a website for my other business. However, I like to just direct people to my LinkedIn profile because really you'll get a response from me within 24 hours if you contact me on LinkedIn. So my last name is Doran. It's spelled Doran. If you just type in Adam Doran in the search, I'm pretty sure I'll come up. There's not a lot of folks with that name, and I'm the only one in Kansas City. So if folks go to my LinkedIn profile, on there you've got my direct phone number, you've got my direct email. It's just the best place to connect with me. And if you send me a connection request and throw in the notes, hey, heard you on Dan's podcast, that would be more than sufficient. I'll know where you came from.
All right. Well, I appreciate you giving of your time here, to share your knowledge, your experience here. I got 3-4 pages of notes here. I really appreciate you coming on the show, Adam.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been fun today and a real privilege just to share.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the REI Diamond Show. And you're probably wondering how you can get your copy of my 165-page business plan, right? The business plan is contained in the book I wrote called How to Become a Wholesale Real Estate Master. When you sign up at www.reidiamonds to receive the new episode notification emails, you'll receive an email with the download link to claim your copy of the book. But wait, there's even more. In that same email, you'll receive a digital bonus package, including the agreement of sale, assignment, and even a vacant house letter I use in my own business to do deals. My only disclaimer is that you have the docs reviewed by an attorney in a state where you are doing business to be sure they comply with your local laws. I release any responsibility for that with that statement. On that page at www.reidiamonds.com, you can also submit expert guest applications, suggest guests, and even submit deals you have for sale. Our organization is currently buying houses, land, and even commercial deals in 4 major U.S. markets: Philadelphia, Pennsylvania region, the Chicagoland, Illinois area, Atlanta, Georgia, and the Tampa Bay area in Florida. And finally, I'd like to ask a small favor from you. If you've been enjoying the show, I'd ask you to leave some feedback or a review in iTunes and Google Play. It helps with ratings, and I personally appreciate the feedback. And if you have certain questions you'd like me to cover on a future episode, you can always contact me using the form on the page at that site, which is www.reidiamonds.com. Dan Breslin here. I will catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.